what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. I'm Ben. This is my 2023 XR650L, and today it's gonna get some new tires. So if you guys missed it, I did put about 200 miles on the stock Bridgestones here. I did buy this bike used, so they've got more on it than that. But because I do plan on doing a decent amount of road riding along with a lot of kind of nasty off-road riding, I think the new Tusk Waypoint tires here are gonna be an awesome option. So huge thanks to my sponsor, Rocky Mountain ATV, for sending these out. If you guys wanna pick a set of these up, I'll have affiliate links down in the description. Doesn't cost you anything extra, but helps me continue to make videos like this for you guys. I've been running the Tusk D Sport tires for a long time. The DR650 I picked up came with them, and I swapped out the stock tires that were on the 701 for a set. Also had a set of them on the KLR, and I think these tires, the Waypoints, would have been a lot better for the KLR just because they're packed a little bit tighter. The knobbies are a little bit larger. And if you're looking for a KLR, this is not gonna fit on there yet. I would hope that eventually they'll come out with a 17, but for now, this is all we've got. Now, the rear is definitely not as aggressive as the D Sport is, but still a pretty aggressive, mean-looking tire, and I think something that should do pretty darn good on the trails that I've got planned. But, of course, we won't know for sure until I get these mounted and get the bike out for a test ride, so if you guys want to see that video, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We'll be doing that as soon as possible. But for right now, let's get these bad boys on the bike. Well, there we are. The Tusk Waypoints are mounted on the XR650L. I've got to say, without using any soap and water, I am pretty impressed with how these tires went on. As you guys saw though, they do seem a bit tight. I mean, they're definitely stiff. I haven't actually tried it, and I certainly wouldn't recommend it, but both these and the D-Sports on the other bikes that I've got almost seem stiff enough that you could ride them without any air in them at all, and maybe someday I'll actually give that a shot. Like I said, it's probably not something you want to do. It's easy to knock a bead off of a rim, but everything does seem pretty tight and pretty stiff on here. So that does almost make me feel a little bit better. However, I mean, as you saw, they do kind of go on a little bit rough. The set of D-Sports that I put on the Gen 3 KLR650, I don't know if those rims are just a hair smaller or what, but those basically just fell on where every bike that I've put tires on since then, I've incurred some sort of injury. Last time I'm pretty sure that I messed something up in my thumb pretty good. It still honestly doesn't feel too great even after a couple months. And this time I bashed myself in the face with one of these guys, which, to be honest, I'm super happy that it was a nice blunt end that I jabbed myself with rather than, well, one of these. And this is the Motion Pro Bead Breaker. I've used these spoons for years, and honestly, they don't really seem that much different than the set of Tusk spoons that I was trying out this time. But I've got to say, I don't know if it's just the little bit of extra width that they have to them. I mean, it's really not much. Maybe it's the hook. I don't know. I did almost kind of like them better. They do seem maybe a little bit too sharp, and sharp is sort of an odd term for a spoon. I mean, they're pretty smooth, but it seems like maybe having them a little bit more rounded might have been a little bit easier on the old Bridgestone that I took off. The new tires, I don't know if it was just that I didn't use enough talc powder or that I was not being careful enough with these new to me type spoons or what the deal was, but it did seem like maybe I kind of displaced a few little bits of rubber around the perimeter of the bead. It's probably not a big deal. I mean, on a tubeless tire, that would be something that you definitely want to avoid. On a tube tire, I mean, you sure don't want to be chewing it up to the point that you're going to be causing lumps and bumps around the bead where that needs to sit on the wheel. But I think the minuscule sections that I kind of chewed up a little bit, I think are maybe just something that's gonna happen no matter what. So until I use these a little bit more, I think maybe I'll reserve judgment, but I have to say I wasn't too disappointed in them and will definitely give them a try again next time. The handle was nice, and like I already mentioned, it's nice to have a blunt end rather than a sharp one. But if you are gonna pick a setup, just maybe be a little bit more careful than usual if you're used to something a little bit less aggressive as far as the edges on here go. Now this Motion Pro curve spoon I've had for more than 10 years actually, and I've got to say, as much as I kind of neglect it most of the time, it really did come in handy, and especially having this bend here to kind of start in places where it's a little bit hard to get around either the tire or the rim. It really comes in handy. At the end there, I used it because it's a much thinner spoon than the Tusks or the Bead Breaker ends. And that really came in handy because, as you guys probably saw, I couldn't even get this in at some points. So this is definitely something that I think I would recommend picking up alongside whatever spoons you decide to go with. If nothing else, just for the fact that you have some more options when these aren't quite doing the job. And honestly, as nice as it was to have 3 of these on hand, I think if I was to go and purchase some of these myself, I would probably take 2 of these and 1 of these. Then you've got the nice wide blades as well as the skinny one and the curved option here. So I think that would probably be my choice. Not that having a couple extras is ever going to hurt, especially if you get one stuck, then maybe you can just grab another one instead of trying to yank it out and almost breaking a few teeth. Live and learn, right? You probably noticed that I've been using these rim protectors less and less, and that's because a lot of times they just end up kind of either getting stuck, pinched, or even kind of squirted out because they get pinched in a way that doesn't actually hold them in place. And I mean, you've got these little spots to put your fingers in to kind of hold them in place, which works sometimes, but in general, you usually need about 3 or 4 hands when you're changing tires. So it's not really something, I guess, that I would say you absolutely need. I mean, it definitely helped me from scratching up my rims in a few spots, but at a certain point, you just don't have enough clearance to have this plus a spoon jammed in between the metal and the rubber. So I think there's something that is maybe a necessity, but not something that you really should get stuck on using. There does just come a time towards the end where you're gonna have to set these aside and just hope that you don't scar your rims up too much. Now, as far as the Bead Buddy 2 here, I've used this a couple times. It does seem like it would sort of be helpful, mostly when you're actually going to be using soap and water, though. Things did seem to be a little bit more sticky than they probably should have been. So I think if I would have been a little bit more generous with the powder, I think things would have kind of slid into place much better, but they weren't slipping and sliding around near as much as they would with soap and water, so that's why I didn't need this. That being said, though, I don't know that the last time I used soap and water, I really would have needed it either. I think I did run into some issues on the 701 where it was helpful, but again, it just ends up being kind of thick and sort of gets in the way of things. Maybe I'm just not quite using it how it should be used, but it's just not something that I have really felt the need for recently. Now, as far as the talc method itself, I would say it's something that I think requires a little bit of further investigation. Obviously, I got the tires on. It seemed like things worked relatively well, other than, again, bashing myself in the face. I do sort of hesitate to really recommend it, though, at least without some extreme caution. And that's mostly just because it seems like the opposite end of the bead or the tire that I was working on didn't quite slip down into the valley as much as I think it would have had it been soapy and wet. You guys maybe saw me kind of smacking it with a tool or pushing it down with my fingers to try to get it to go in. In no situation other than when I mounted the D-Sports on my Gen 3 has a tire ever really just fell onto a rim. I mean, that's sort of not something that I would ever or should ever expect, even though for some reason I still do. But of course you are kind of riding a fine line between nicely stretching it over and possibly wrecking something. So you do kind of have to have some discretion there and be a bit careful. But all in all, like I said, I think this method is something that I will try again and maybe give you guys a better synopsis of whether or not it's something that I would recommend that you try at home after that. As far as this stand here, as far as the Tusk tire change stand, I have to say I don't know that I would ever want to change the tire without one of these again. And really same goes for the Tusk lift, and especially if you have a 350-pound bike, you really probably shouldn't buy a stand that's only rated for 300 pounds. As you guys saw and as I've talked about before, you can get the bike sort of up off the ground with a little bit of a pull from your arms while you're starting the jack up. Once it's kind of past that hardest point, then the bike can pretty much be lifted 100% by the jack and it's not a problem. Still something that's probably not very safe to have a giant bike that's 50 pounds over the weight limit. So as usual, my official recommendation is don't buy this 300-pound capacity jack if you have anything heavier than a 300-pound bike. If you have anything lighter than a 300-pound bike, though, that thing is probably my favorite tool. It definitely saves my back, as does this. And I don't know that any of you guys would purchase one of these things and be disappointed, but like I said, you don't really have to use them. If it's something you think you would use enough to make it worth your while and worth the cost, then I think you will definitely not be disappointed and will never wish that you hadn't spent the money on it, because they definitely are nice tools to have, but they do sort of spoil you, because honestly, I don't know that I will ever want to change the tire on the side of a trail now that I've done it this way. As for the balancing touring stand up on the bench there, that again is something that you don't need, but if this is something that you're gonna do on a regular basis, balancing motorcycle tires is fairly important and something that could easily give you a pretty nasty ride if not done or not done properly. The truing part of it is definitely just kind of a good peace of mind thing. If you ever run into some sort of an issue, a shake, it would definitely be something that I think could help you either rule out a bent or tweaked rim or rule it in and then hopefully get it fixed. It's not something that I've personally done, but it doesn't seem like it's anything all that complicated, as long as you don't over tighten anything and snap any spokes. In the past, I've used just a long rod or an axle bolt or something and some wood or cardboard boxes to kind of get the tire up off the ground, and then I can check the weights, and that's always worked well enough. But again, if it's something you're gonna do a lot, it just makes sense, I think, to have the right tools. And honestly, if you do a couple tire changes, at least in our area, you will have pretty much paid for your tools. I think my dad said he paid $100 to have the Tenere 700 tire swapped out, and that is a lot more than it used to be. So maybe it's worth it, although if you break a finger or break your jaw or break a tooth, now that savings maybe goes out the window pretty quick. Luckily, I don't think I have anything that is gonna cost me any money, but my jaw sure doesn't feel too great today. As far as the tires themselves, I definitely like the way that they look on the bike. I'm kind of surprised that the front isn't more aggressive looking compared to the original set. I suppose it is a bit more aggressive and I think should make a noticeable difference. The rear, however, is definitely mean looking and I think quite a bit wider than the stock one. Is it just meatier looking or is it bigger? No, it's gotta be wider. Of course it was. I had to take the brake off to get it on. I don't know what these are for plies, but it is not anything near as much as the Tusks are. Looks like tread is 2 and sidewall was 2. I guess these are only 3 and 2. Look at that. Definitely a stiff ply though, and a mean set of tires. If you guys want to see how these things perform out on the road and the trail, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I can hear the wind howling out there now, but I'm gonna get out on this thing and give these things a good test as soon as I can. I'm super excited to see how they do. I hope you guys are too. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care, stay safe, stay swanky, get out, enjoy this beautiful world any chance you get. And if you can't do that right now, here's some more videos to check out in the meantime.